And I think it's almost even after the fact where I realize that I was carving out a different sort of life than other people. I'm so glad I don't have to live that life anymore. I can just live in this little house and things are simple. Things are natural. When I was a kid, I loved to build snow forts because I grew up in very snowy country. There's something magical about going inside, and the quality of the sound was different. You know, almost like a seashell type of sound. It was a way that I could have a little house. I knew it would melt in the spring. I think the exhilaration I had in building those forts with my hands, I think that feeling just stuck with me. I remember going for a walk one day and I was thinking, yeah, these houses are all the same size as mine, and I guess all people want to move on to a bigger house. And I just thought, I don't want to. I didn't want to keep going to bigger houses, bigger incomes, better jobs. I didn't have really a career sense. I didn't need that. I was working at the Tucson Weekly as a graphic designer, and it was a wonderful place to work, but it was going to be sold. I wanted to be ready for whatever financial situation would come about. My daughter grew up and left home. And the house, even though I think it's about 850 square feet, the main house, that was too big for a single person, I thought. I didn't need that much space. The thing that really got me fired up, that really got me ready to step out and do this project, was a slideshow that Shay Solomon brought to different parts of the city, and I saw it twice. She showed these gorgeous small spaces. I mean, they were beautiful.
Life is complex right now, and people love minimalism. And it feels like scaling down into a tiny house is going to bring you a simpler life.
It was important that I took that workshop and started to realize I could build a house, you know?
So the main reason that people live in small houses and love living in small houses is freedom. It's the freedom that they get from being able to be in a little bit less constrained and constricted world. Right now we're in such a constricted world with so many laws on top of laws and regulations and forms to fill out and debts to pay and worries and medications. And the tiny house is a little bit of it's an out breath. It's just, I just have my tiny little house, and right here I feel safe and in control.
First there were all the utilities, the phone bill, the electric bill, the water bill, gas bill. I wanted to get rid of all my bills. In other words, get off the grid.
One of the things I love about the small living, like Kay does, is you don't have a mortgage, you don't have a bill, and so you've got more money in your pocket to just run into the mountains, okay? Or just run out in the yard and listen to the birds sing.
I was free, and I felt this was the best kind of freedom.
If you're really attached to the world around you, and not theoretically attached, not like, oh, I love the environment, but that you physically touch plants and you touch animals and you touch earth every day, and you want to build a house in this way, where you're actually using your hands, like Kay did. You actually go in your backyard and you start digging a hole, not with machinery, but really with her hands, every day, digging and digging and digging.
The casita is made out of mud because that's traditionally what people built their houses from here. And I didn't do it to be traditional. I did it because it made sense. There's a substance called cob that's been used in the British Isles, which is dirt, water, and straw. That's it. And they've been building like that for centuries. But really here, I like to call it freeform adobe because it's adobe, like any historical adobe house that you would visit here. It was very useful for the underground part of the building. But I finally realized that the rough surface of the hole, the rough wall of the excavation, all I needed to do is throw mud at it. So what I did was, the side of the hole I dug was just rough dirt. And I took this and plastered it against the side of the hole. And then I smoothed it with my hand. You do at least 2 layers, and a finishing layer, and then maybe a plaster layer. So it's a lot of work. You don't just get a beautiful wall from doing 1 coat. But it's fun.
And it's a process that can easily take a year. It often takes many years to build a cob house, because especially people who are actually digging up the soil themselves and not having it brought in. They're digging it up, mixing the cob, putting it on the wall. The wall is maybe growing only 6 inches a day or a foot a day.
There is something about that activity that just feels so good.
Such a different experience to have a house that you actually touched all of it as you were building it, and that you know exactly where each little piece of dirt came from because it came from a very specific spot. And maybe you stamped on it with your feet, and then maybe you smoothed it, and then maybe you colored it with colors. You remember that moment when you chose a certain color and then you actually applied it with your own hands.
It was so wonderful to just slap that mud on and smooth it and realize this was going to be my wall. I loved waking up in the morning because I knew I didn't have to go to work. I could wake up and go stick my hands in mud and make this building rise. My friend Dan told me about this word in Japanese called wabi-sabi. The way I would define wabi-sabi would be, it's an aesthetic that appreciates irregular things, worn out things, things with history. When something doesn't go right, I just say wabi-sabi, and it brings it into the system in a positive way.
I love that with her small house, which she built, it's an inspiration. So we don't have to be reliant on others building things for us. We don't have to be reliant on buying the materials we need. So much of what she got, she just salvaged.
What really excites me about building by hand is everything's free. Dirt's free.
So it gets you to see in new ways. It's like, what? You're using old evaporative cooler pads? I didn't know there was any use for that.
It's kind of set me free in some ways because I don't have to follow anything. I just collect these things, and things are uneven and different.
I don't have to go through the same process. So she's an encyclopedia, and an encyclopedia from experience. So her diploma is the home in which she lives. It's the yard that she tends, and those are dynamic because they're ever changing, and they're unique to her and her passions and her experience, as opposed to just the same as everyone else tracked home.
When I moved to Tucson, I was concerned about the water because you had to water, and I thought, well, maybe it's not worth gardening here because this is a desert. But I soon realized that importing food from everywhere else probably damages the planet more than using the water here. And then I also found out about water harvesting.
So instead of just being totally dependent on the city tap, the faucet for the city water, well, what if I could look at other options? And what might those be? Oh, I could do the rain. I could do that water once used going down my drain, the gray water. Oh, there's another water source. What about that water dripping from the neighbor's air conditioning unit? Could I actually use that for something? Could that be free? What about all this water flowing down the street in a storm, that storm water? Oh yeah, no one's using that. That's just going to the storm drain. Freebies. And that could maybe irrigate street trees for free to then shade and shelter the street and feed those living along the street. Bonus.
You could direct your roof water, or actually any surface in your yard, you could direct it where you wanted it to help your plants. Then I thought, well, I can garden then. It's not a bad thing. I can do it here.
By harvesting water directly on site and using that for the garden instead, that closes a loop, and it's a very close, non-energy intensive way of getting part of your food.
Most of us don't have any idea where our water comes from or the other things we utilize in our lives. And by harvesting rainwater, you are directly connected. Not just from where it comes from, but then you become connected to where it goes, everything else. Yeah, it's a way to connect with life.
Yeah, so my roof has a very slight slope to it, and it has a ridge that goes this way. And so this front slope runs into this gutter and into that and into this cistern. And then the back slope, all that water runs into that cistern. When there's a rain, everything grows and turns green. It's different from watering with groundwater because of all the salts in groundwater, and plants can really tell the difference. So it's good to have plant water here.
By literally planting the rain, I enable more life to grow where it wouldn't grow before without taking water or life from others. I'm not extracting from a groundwater table. I'm not extracting from a river, but rather I'm just taking this free gift from the sky, and I'm helping more of it go into the soil life, the roots, the living pumps of vegetation, which then produce food, habitat, shade, beauty, and so much more. So life just becomes richer for me and all around me.
If we can grow some of our own food, provide for some of our own water, it goes a long way towards both being a backup system to the current way we deliver water and food, but also it is just a way of building redundancy into your life, but also because fresh vegetables taste good and don't taste anything like what you get at the store because they're so fresh.
It's just another kind of independence where you know where that piece of kale came from, and it didn't have any pesticides. Whenever there's a scandal about some food being recalled, I think, oh, I'm so glad that I am not a part of that. I never liked to cook. That wasn't my thing growing up. So cooking really happened when I got interested in eating from the landscape, because I didn't know how to cook these things. I love getting free food. I want to find out, especially when I moved here, what's edible here? And you wouldn't think in a desert there was much that was edible, but almost everything is edible. Now that I'm not building so much, I have more time to explore the foods that I can pick. You can grind mesquite beans in a blender, and you can make stuff with the flour, all kinds of stuff. Cookies are especially good. Good with ice too, just like coffee, iced or hot. It's basically just mesquite beans that I throw in a pot with water and boil it about an hour, half an hour. Have to add either pumpkin spices or just add your own nutmeg, ginger, cinnamon. You strain it out and then you have this delicious free drink. I guess the spices weren't free, but during the mesquite season you can just go out here, pick a bunch of beans off the ground. You have to make sure they're perfectly white, that it hasn't rained lately, or pick them off the tree and throw them in a pot and make your drink all summer. Yeah, these things, well, I just like to eat them on the spot. I score them with my thumb, and there it is. Kind of is an unusual texture. I don't know what to compare it to. The little black things are seeds, and they're very nutty and very tasty. You can just pop them right out. Very mild. Doesn't taste like much, just a little crunchy. It's just a journey of discovery. Yeah, and of course I have to depend on standard vegetables that I get at the market, that people grow for me, but I'm learning to combine them, and I'm actually starting to be a good cook. So when I did decide to sell my car, it was really because biking is less stressful. Cars can be so stressful. You know, you've got your tires, you've got your license, you've got your gas, you've got your traffic tickets, you've got your tires in the landfill burning. There's so many stresses connected with a car that you don't have with a bike. I love biking for other reasons. You can see what people are doing with their yards. You know who has a dog. You find out who your new neighbor is. There's a physical feeling with biking that's just totally different from driving. You're using your own steam. You get to the top of the hill, you get to ride down the hill. It's almost as though it's carrying me away. It feels effortless. You feel like your heart is getting stronger. You feel better in your head. Your head is not so muddled because you're concentrating on that push of the pedal. It's better than a roller coaster. It really is. It gives you that kind of high. So I guess I became an anti-consumerist when I realized that the stuff I bought for myself didn't make me happy. We know now that things don't make you happy. Some people keep trying, but we know that. As a culture, we're starting to understand that things don't make you happy and experiences make you happy. But there are actually some studies that determine how long that new whatever you just bought is going to make you happy. If it's a car, maybe a few weeks before you get used to it and and don't get a charge out of it anymore. And something else, maybe even less time. Things just, the shine doesn't last. But it's different when I go into the casita. I always feel good. I always feel as good as when I first finished it. It's just the kind of satisfying thing that is different from consumer goods that you'd buy. I actually have invented a term called lifestyle voting. Maybe once or twice in a year you have an opportunity to vote. But when you vote with your lifestyle, everything you buy and everything you don't buy is definitely counted. There's no voter fraud. If you don't buy that product, then the seller is not going to get the money for it. So you vote for that product or against that product. We could make an impact. It would not have to be a revolution where people are getting killed in the streets. This is a very peaceful way of voting for the kind of world that you want. So to some extent, I've escaped from the modern world. And I think everyone needs to make choices. What parts of technology do you want to keep? What parts really serve your creativity? And what parts you don't really need and just burden you? I think that we do have consciences. Some people, maybe not so much. They're very skilled at stuffing their conscience. But we know when we've done something that's destructive, when we're doing something that causes pain to the world in whatever way. I think that's real. And when you get away from that, you like yourself better.
So much what Kay is doing gives back more than it takes. So the rain falls from the sky. Instead of shunting that off into the neighbor to flood their yard, she's literally planting or infiltrating it into the soil on her land, thereby reducing flooding of her neighbors, and at the same time, reducing her need or eliminating the need to bring water in from elsewhere. Yeah, she's turning waste into resources.
People feel out of touch with nature, out of touch with reality, out of touch with each other. And this is one thing that cob building and natural building and tiny houses, when they're hand built, can really provide for someone, which is a grounding, an emotional grounding, an intellectual grounding in what's really there.
I think the benefits of this lifestyle are physical and mental. Physical health and emotional health. I really think so. I really think nature, being in nature, touching the dirt, living in a way that we evolved to live. I am creative, and it's not that I try to be. I don't have to try to be an artist. I just create stuff. And I am an artist, and I see myself as an artist now.
You know, when all is done, you've enhanced the life for yourself and for this living planet. You haven't made it worse. And you feel like you're getting away with something all the time because you're not doing the typical path. So it's a lot funner, and you have stories to tell.
I don't regard myself as a model or an example to copy, because I think each person's interpretation of their life and their lifestyle should be unique to their identity or their place, or actually both. Equating your work with your play. If you can find that, and if it involves nature and physical activity, yeah, I think you'll be happy.